Welcome back to Comicgeddon TV, the only place on YouTube where all geek culture collides. I'm Shannon, and today on the show, we're going to be taking a look at the 2022 animated movie Trick or Treat Scooby-Doo. So the voice cast for this film, there are a couple of returning cast members from the Scooby-Doo legacy of actors. Primarily, Frank Welker returns as Scooby-Doo and Fred. He also plays Count Nefario. And then Matthew Lillard returns as Shaggy. Daphne is played by Gray Delisle, and Velma is played by Kate Micucci. This movie it wasn't what I was expecting. I've been trying to get into the Halloween spirit lately. The past few years, really. Halloween hasn't been what it used to be. You see it all over YouTube, The old days of Halloween are gone. Streaming services have killed off traditional Halloweens as we know it, because there's no more Halloween specials and it's not an event anymore. Not as many kids go out trick-or-treating as they used to in the 80s and 90s. There are very few Halloween specials being made nowadays. And so I've been scouring the streaming services, trying to find Halloween-related movies to put me into the Halloween spirit. And so I came upon the bundle on Fandango. Trick or Treat Scooby-Doo, and I think it's the other Halloween, Scooby-Doo Halloween animated movie. I can't remember the name of it now, but I'll probably do a review on that soon as well, if not next year. I was really expecting Halloween to take a more central focus of this film, because it's called Trick or Treat Scooby-Doo. And while Halloween does play a part in it, it's not very prominent. They talk about it in the beginning, and then it's the focus of the end. But throughout the film, there's not a lot going on when it comes to Halloween. And that's disappointing. I recently watched Spirit Halloween and also Hubie Halloween, and plans on watching Ernest Scared Stupid. And each of those movies have something in common. Halloween is the central focus of the films. It's not just a background, where something happened during Halloween and doesn't really play much more of a role than that. Halloween is the story, essentially. But with Trick or Treat Scooby-Doo, it seemed more like a background type thing. Like, okay, this stuff's happening during Halloween. And yes, Shaggy and Scooby really want to go trick-or-treating. But other than that, it doesn't play much of a part. And so it was disappointing in that aspect. I will say I did like the callbacks to previous incarnations of the Scooby franchise, particularly the callbacks to my favorite incarnation of Scooby-Doo, and that's Scooby-Doo, Where Are You?, the first one that came out. I really loved the creepiness of that cartoon, especially the intro music was always a favorite of mine. Growing up as a kid, I've always been into spooky stuff. And that theme song, I loved how they brought that into the Scoob movie. And I liked the twist they did on it with this movie. They kind of spoofed it, because Mystery Inc. had solved all the cases. They wrapped everything up. There was callbacks to all the previous incarnations. All the villains got their costumes from one costume maker who was behind everything. And she plays a central part into this film, starting off as a villain, and then she helps the Mystery Inc. Solve the case. It was interesting, at the very end of the movie, once, all everything's wrapped up, tied up in this case. It's a who's who of Scooby villains. They do the pan of all the villains at the end, tied up because they had escaped prison and the Scooby gang had to reapprehend them all. And so they pan across all of them and you see all the old villains. I think primarily the villains they showcase are the ones from the early Scooby-Doo series, because there's just too many villains over the years to really showcase every last one, but they do their best in that, and I did like that callback. Velma develops a crush on the main character of this movie, Coco Diablo. She's the one who created all the old costumes for the villains. She's the one who eventually helps them solve this case. This movie kind of confirms that Velma is LGBTQ+. I haven't really watched the new Velma series other than the first episode, and I wasn't very impressed with it. I didn't like it at all. And I haven't really watched a lot of the animated Scooby-Doo movies over the years. I've seen a few here and there, if they're on TV or my kids are watching them or whatever. I will catch some scenes, but I haven't really been consistent with it over the years. So I know there had always been this theory that Velma was gay and all this. In the live action Scooby-Doo movies, she has her own romantic interests and Seth Green's character and all that, and they kind of turn her into a badass or whatever and a sex symbol. And now in this one, she's part of the LGBTQ+ community, which there's nothing wrong with. It's just interesting how they have manipulated Velma's character over the years. Primarily, Velma was the brains of the team. She wasn't a sex symbol at all. She wasn't really sexual at all, which I feel as it should be in a children's cartoon. There shouldn't really be references to sex and all this and romance and all that in a children's cartoon. I think we're getting to the point where we're over-sexualizing everything, and we're pushing kids to grow up faster than they should. The last time I visited my grandparents with my kids a few weeks ago, my grandparents were asking my son and daughter, who are 15 and 13, if my daughter had a boyfriend yet and if my son had a girlfriend yet, asking why not. They need boyfriend, they need a girlfriend, blah, 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 blah. Kids need to be kids. Kids need to have the opportunity to be kids. They don't need to worry about dating. They don't need to worry about romance. They don't need to get into all that. Everything's being hypersexualized nowadays, to where younger and younger kids are starting to feel like they have to be involved with somebody. And so I've always kind of looked at cartoons as kind of a safe place for kids. While yes, having Velma have this schoolgirl crush on this character, it was cute, it was funny at times. It was a little over the top. I do wish cartoons would keep romance, whether it be between same-sex or different sex couples, individuals, out of their shows. Yeah, every once in a while, having a boyfriend and girlfriend or married couple, whatever, fine. When you introduce romance into the main characters of the cartoons, it can be a little pushy, in my opinion. And I know there's been a history of cartoons doing that, with Animaniacs and Tiny Toon Adventures and stuff like that, which in those cases they were central parts of the characters. It wasn't turning a character into something they aren't, or weren't designed to be. That was a central part of who they were. Buster Bunny and Babs Bunny were always kind of going after, the opposite gender, often finding attraction in the opposite gender. And then, you have the Warner Brothers with the Hello Nurse, aspect. It's difficult seeing a cartoon from my childhood that didn't really ever revolve around romance or sexual interest start to more heavily move in that direction. It was off-putting with the live-action movies, especially when they sexualized Velma, and it's off-putting now. I think we need to go back to a much simpler time when it comes to our cartoons, where we don't over-sexualize everything and don't over-romanticize everything. You know, if it's a core part of the character from their inception, okay, fine, whatever. But changing characters in order to sexualize them is something completely different, and I don't think we should do it. With that being said, I did find Velma's crush on Coco to be amusing. It was amusing, but yeah, I don't feel Velma should be sexualized, you know, in that way. She was very much the Data, the Vulcan of the series, you know. So it was set in Coolsville, which is a callback to the live action movies, as well as the pup named Scooby-Doo, which is where Coolsville was first introduced, was a pup named Scooby-Doo. You know, they do set up a booth at the Coolsville Halloween Festival in order to try and drum up interesting cases after all the interesting cases have gone dry for over a year after the apprehension of Coco. And that kind of goes south, but it leads into the new case of the Misery Company ghosts and Count Nefario and all that. It was interesting to see the twist on Mystery Incorporated as villains, ancient villains in Misery Company. That was interesting and humorous, you know, is a good spin on that. Some of the flaws, other than romanticizing and sexualizing Velma, throughout the movie, Fred treated Daphne like she does nothing at all. Very tongue-in-cheek to past incarnations of the characters. Very similar to the live action where Daphne even said she got tired of being the damsel in distress and learned how to defend herself and became this badass action hero, you know. Whereas in this film, it's played up where, okay, Velma, you look for clues. Shaggy and Scoob, you do your thing, I'll do my thing, and Daphne, yeah. It was very tongue-in-cheek. It was amusing, but at the same time, it was too on the nose. Like I said, my favorite adaptation of Scooby-Doo was the original, the Scooby-Doo Where Are You? With the more serious tone, with the more slapstick humor rather than the intentional in-your-face humor. Some of the animation in the movie also reminds me of the Steven Universe style of animation. It's mostly when the characters become very expressionistic, very nervous, or in Velma's case, when she's obviously expressing interest in Coco, but doesn't want to let on or doesn't want to admit it, or when Fred becomes really scared or whatever. That Steven Universe style of animation, I've never cared for it. It's too reminiscent of Beatles' Yellow Submarine style animation. Very early 70s, late 60s, early style animation. Very noodly, spaghetti-like animation. I don't care for. I don't care for the lack of corners. Everything's rounded. There's no bends or anything. There's no real straight lines. Everything's just like a spaghetti noodle, essentially. So yeah, I don't really care for that style of animation. And while the entire movie isn't like that, enough of it is to be off-putting. Another flaw was that they destroyed the Mystery Machine. And that does lead into a montage scene towards the end where they have to rebuild the Mystery Machine and make it, and they end up making it look more like the Dragula or the Munsters coach than the actual Mystery Machine. And yeah, it's a cool design, and I like the design, but that's not the Mystery Machine. The Mystery Machine is a VW bus, and not a Munsters coach, not a Dragula. The design was cool, but it wasn't the Mystery Machine. However, the song that plays during that montage scene, which was changed by Joseph Holiday, it had a very goth sound, or at the very least pre-punk. It was very reminiscent of the Teddy Bears featuring Iggy Pop song Punk Rocker from the Superman movie. It was very much like that style, but a little bit more of a darker tone, maybe a cross between the Teddy Bears and Nick Cave. So it was more of a goth style, which was probably more to stay in line with the Halloween theme. Some of the positives, some of the things I liked about the movie were that Matthew Lillard and Frank Welker returned. Frank Welker has long been the voice of Scooby-Doo and the voice of Fred. Matthew Lillard, since appearing in the live action Scooby-Doo movies, has become Shaggy. While his voice is different from Casey Kasem, who initially created the voice for the character, it still has the same heart and soul of Casey Kasem's Shaggy. The sound, it doesn't have Casey's scruffiness in the sound of the voice, but it has everything else that goes along with it, if that makes sense. So yeah, I really love Matthew Lillard as Shaggy. I wish they would keep him as Shaggy in every incarnation of Scooby-Doo going forward. I know there's been a few things that he wasn't Shaggy in, such as, I believe, the Velma series and a couple others. But yeah, Matthew Lillard is essentially Shaggy Rogers. I like the spoof callback to the Scooby-Doo Where Are You theme. As I mentioned earlier, that was my favorite theme of the entire franchise. And the fact that they kind of used that at the beginning of this movie, but twisted it and kind of poked fun at it, saying, hey, they solved all the cases. They caught all the villains, now life is boring and all that. It was amusing. And it was a nice callback to the original. Again, Misery Company, that was an interesting, very amusing part of the movie. And these are just both positives and negatives, I guess. See, the librarian, she kind of stole the scene when she was telling off the Misery Company, telling them that they should be ashamed of themselves, that they're old enough to know better and all that. And then having the ballroom blitz being played during the library chase scene. I loved how the ballroom blitz was used in Daddy Daycare, and it was used in much of the same way here. And it really brought back a lot of the old vibes from the other chase scenes from the Scooby-Doo series. I've already gone over some of the positives and negatives. These are things that were both positive and negative. Not just specifically positive, not just specifically negative, but both. Less like Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? And more like the live action films that I would say would be both positive and negative. While I love the old school Scooby-Doo cartoons, I did enjoy the live action movies, and this was more reminiscent of the live action movies than the old school cartoons, which can be both a good and a bad thing. If you're expecting one of the older style of Scooby-Doo cartoons, it could be a bad thing. But if you fell in love with the live action and that's your Scooby-Doo, then it could be a good thing. Again, the theme song, the spoof callback to the Scooby-Doo Where Are You theme, both a good thing and a bad thing. I enjoyed it, but it was different enough to where I could see having a problem with it. It wouldn't be my go-to Scooby-Doo theme, but it was good nonetheless. And like I said, the Mystery Machine rebuild, both positive and negative. The fourth wall breaks. There are a lot of fourth wall breaks throughout this movie. And I don't think they've, other than in the live action, I don't think they've really done too many fourth wall breaks throughout the Scooby-Doo franchise. They are very, very specific fourth wall breaks. Uh, Even the warden mentions about this being a children's movie, you know. And then another one of the positives and negatives is the release of all the old villains. You know, it is good to have that call back to the all the old cartoons and see all the old villains. Was it over the top? Yes. Which could be considered a bad thing. But having the callback to all the old villains is a good thing. The only negative for that was that they made their characters' personalities very over the top. You know, they're villains, so when they escape, they immediately start stealing all the children's candy on Halloween night as they're trick or treating. You know, and then Mystery Inc. Their personalities were very over exaggerated as well. Fred is so obsessed with having interesting cases to solve that he goes to a wishing well and wishes for an interesting case. And then he gets excited when they have one. And then at the end, he goes to the same wishing well and he starts throwing dollar bills down the wishing well, hoping for more interesting cases. That was amusing. Really makes their personalities over the top. Scooby-Doo and Shaggy were pretty much obsessed with trick-or-treating all throughout the movie. They weren't scared of the villains for the same reason that they usually are. They were more scared that solving this case was going to interfere with them trick-or-treating. That was their primary concern. That's what they were afraid of. And so it kind of put a little bit of a damper on the movie. While yes, it was amusing, it kind of changed their personalities a bit to be less scaredy cats and more self-absorbed, childish, more just wanting to trick or treat. I don't know how else to describe it. Just when you think the movie's over, you know, they've caught the warden, it continues. You know, all the past villains escape and they have to catch them again, which is both good and bad. You know, it gave a false ending to the movie, which I think has been overdone in recent years, specifically with the Lord of the Rings franchise. But it was a nice twist. And then having Mystery Inc. wear the villains' costumes in order to catch the villains. That was a cool twist. That was funny. Seeing them in 4 of the old costumes or 5 of the old costumes from Scooby-Doo Where Are You that actually play a role in the opening credits. That was fun. I liked that a lot. Was it over the top? Yeah. Could people see it as a negative? Sure, but it was fun. It was a nice little twist. Finally, at the end of the movie, we get to see the common trope throughout every incarnation of the Scooby-Doo franchise, where Velma drops her glasses and she can't find them. Only this time she doesn't drop her glasses. Her being overwhelmed that Coco had expressed an interest in her overheated her, I guess, and caused her glasses to melt off her, which is more of that Steven Universe style of art that I didn't really care for. It was amusing, but because of the way it was done, I didn't really care for it. You know, you gotta love the Velma losing her glasses trope. It's so common. It comes into play in every incarnation of Scooby-Doo, except for Scooby-Doo and Scrappy, which didn't include Velma. But yeah, having the glasses melt off her in that very Steven Universe way, very over the top, very spaghetti style art, I didn't really care for. Overall, I would give the movie maybe a 3 out of 5 stars. It wasn't amazing, but it wasn't terrible. Was it a good Scooby-Doo movie? Sure. Was it a good Halloween movie? Not really. Like I said, Halloween isn't really a central part of the movie. The only time it's really incorporated in the movie is around Scooby-Doo and Shaggy's interest in going trick-or-treating. When I look for Halloween movies, I want Halloween to play a bigger part in the movie. You know, like Spirit Halloween, like Hubie Halloween, like Ernest Scared Stupid, like Halloween. See, what are some others? Spaced Invaders. The list could go on and on. And yeah, there are movies that, while they don't center around Halloween, are associated with Halloween, like the Universal Monsters movies, which my wife and I have been binge watching here lately. The Addams Family, the Munsters TV series, which I just recently tried watching the Rob Zombie movie from a few years back. Only made it about halfway through that. Horrible, horrible movie. I'm a big Munsters fan, and Rob Zombie calling himself a Munsters fan and making such a horrible version of them, it's just wrong. And I'm saying this as a Rob Zombie fan. Rob Zombie was one of my favorite artists through high school, through my early 20s. I really enjoyed his 2 Halloween movies, which I still think they should turn into more, if they were to continue the original Halloween timeline, not the Halloween Ends part, but the original, having the Rob Zombie Halloween movies be in-universe, inspired by true events movies. I think that would be an interesting take. But I digress. So as a Halloween movie, I would probably give Trick or Treat Scooby-Doo probably a 2 out of 5 stars. Not really a Halloween movie. Halloween plays a very small part in the movie. They could get rid of Halloween in that movie altogether, and it wouldn't really change a whole lot. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this review. I'm going to try to do more videos now that my time in school is coming to an end. I'll be graduating in December. I've already started my career. Yeah, I'll have more time on my hands. I won't be bogged down with school. And again, 2026 is the 10-year anniversary of Comicgeddon TV. So I'm hoping to put out a lot more content during that time. So I've been Shannon, and this has been Comicgeddon TV. Take care, geeks.
Happy Halloween!
If you enjoyed that video, make sure to check out one of these 2 playlists for more videos just like the one you just watched. I've been Shannon, this has been Comicgeddon TV, the only place on YouTube where all geek culture collides. Take care, geeks.